Good, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Time is 4:02 p.m. I am in chambers. It is the second day of Council Strategy Committee meetings. Here with me is CAO DeJong, CFO Pamela Rook. Online is Municipal Coordinator Duarte. And here we have Councillors Abbott, Armare, and Cunliffe. And you can't believe it, we're all together once every 2 years. And Councillor Bain is online. So welcome everybody in the gallery, and we'll get right into it. Where we left this yesterday is that we came out of closed, leaving that nothing to report, and came into open, nothing, and pause for to today at this time. So I'm calling the meeting to order, and the adoption of the agenda is before us. No change from prior, so I'm going to presume that there is no issue there unless there's some additions that I don't know of. CAO, do you have any?
I don't.
Councillors or other staff?
I think, Norm, are you providing some on-table information from the CAC committee? Or?
That was here yesterday.
It was here yesterday, the on-table stuff.
Okay. There's some stuff right here. Table.
So, and you're going to deal with that in the committee reports, item D. Councillor Berman?
Yep.
Title. Good. Okay, so I think there's no change. CFO, anything else? CFO?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Good, we're done. All right, no change in the agenda. So which will bring us to public participation. I see several in the gallery, some from yesterday. Thank you for your perseverance. And again, today, we've got a small amount of time for public participation. So we have 2 minutes per, and I see Mayor Broughton's already got her hand up. She's keen. And so if you'd unmute Mayor Broughton, we'll let you begin.
Thank you very much. And it's great to see so many in chambers. I'm going back to something that I opened and possibly closed with yesterday, but it's based on a comment made by Mayor McLaughlin that only a few letters had been sent regarding the stop sign. And Mayor McLaughlin, you'd made that comment to me about a letter that I'd sent, that I was the only letter, so you hadn't sent it to council. But I'm wanting to ensure that the letters, I know that at least 3 letters were sent from Brunswick. I didn't create those letters. People emailed me that they'd sent them, and 3 letters regarding or from this neighborhood. And I don't know how many other letters there were. But it's really important for council to read the letters, not the person who's the identified person to summarize the letters, but each letter, when you put in the village update, please comment. So I want to show you this. I was sent this today. You've seen it in the village update.
Yes.
Okay. Now, why I show that to you is it has a stop sign clearly shown with rail cars behind it going through Lions Bay. And it's a wonderful explanation that there's going to be more rail traffic. But the point being that they've shown a stop sign. They have discussed safety in that brief message to the village of Lions Bay. It is irresponsible to hire a consultant to determine whether or not removing stop signs is a safety issue in Lions Bay. We know that the removal of the stop signs at the 3 CN railway crossings will create danger, increased danger for our residents. And, you know, I just even hate to say it without touching wood, possible accidents. And I'm sure none of you would want that to occur, but all of you know the risk of removing those stop signs. And so I say this to Mayor McLaughlin as a former mayor. This kind of communication, as I'd sent off to each of you, that section 8.4, paragraph 4 identifies that the municipality is the last authority on whether there's stop signs or not. But something like this, with all due respect to Mr. Jaffer, who I know you do a competent and good job, But this kind of issue has to rise to the council level. It has to rise to the mayor and council level. And whether it's discussing it with a senior person at Transport Canada or with our member of parliament, starting maybe with our member of parliament. But this issue is an issue that can be cemented and confirmed probably within 1 or 2 weeks, if not a day, of actually a meeting between our mayor and a senior person, but certainly not in the hands of somebody do we agree with the report? Don't we agree with the report? When we all know this is a very serious safety issue for Lions Bay. The role of staff, whether you live here or not, is not to change Lions Bay. It's not to upgrade it or downgrade it, but it is to follow council's orders, and I know that. And the role of staff with Transport Canada is the same. And so they wouldn't even know about paragraph 4, section 8.4, paragraph 4. It is council's responsibility to take this forward because council is the citizens' representative. And because
Thank you very much for your recommendation, Mayor Brody.
Safety issue, thank you very much.
Thank you. We've still got some time. If another gallery member would like to unmute, don't have Mr. Reuters. Again, you don't have to show your video if you don't want to. And for anybody who follows Mr. Reuters, same deal. And then we'll go with Mr. Sretsky afterwards. Mr. Reuters, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much. Councillors, I've been before you a few times now and have spoken with reference to the UCB issue in terms of participatory democracy and how I've observed that our residents and our body politic have embraced this question in a robust and considered and profound way. There's been no shortage of discussion amongst our residents. And frankly, it's been inspiring and an edifying thing to be a small part of. And it's important because it casts aside cynicism and brings out the best in us, engagement with and an abiding affection for the place that we live in. By keeping this thing on track, by not allowing it to get diverted down diversionary rabbit holes, you have in the past acknowledged that you have heard our voices and that our residents will always step up when an issue really matters to us. Some of you have called this issue a no-brainer and have dispelled the myth that this is all about wood burning by recognizing that this issue has been, with respect to the rural orientation, that over 90% of our residents have expressed a canary in the mine shaft. I know it hasn't been easy. I know to keep this issue, it hasn't been easy to keep this issue moving forward and to see the residents' will done. It seems to me that always lurking at the edges of our table, frankly, has been the somewhat insulting notion that our residents haven't adequately grasped the issue, have misunderstood, or aren't equipped to penetrate deeply enough into the arcane complexities of this matter. Well, I don't believe that for a second, and I believe that most of you do not either. I encourage you to continue to resist further diversions and to move forward with the steps to take concrete action as soon as possible and to finally see the residents' will done. Thank you so much for your attention to this matter. You've accomplished much and we're almost there. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roy. Mr. Sretsky, you're up. If you could unmute, sir.
Thank you, and a good day to you. I want to point a few words here in line with two other speakers, actually, as it happened. After last week's council meeting and the one yesterday, I have received many phone calls from residents in the village. We had unprecedented participation in popular vote recently and have received clear mandate. If you look at the number of people voting and subtract children and those that are in southern states at the moment, which is over 200 of our residents, almost total participated, and 90% of it spoke very clearly on one direction. Based on that and my observation, I must ask again, and I say again, our administrator to stop manipulating our destiny. The residents, with the help of our council, are the ones that decide on our preferences, activity, and a village future, and only residents. Your job, Mr. Administrator, is to administer what's given to you, not otherwise. Please take it seriously. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much, Mr. Sretsky. For clarity, I'm sure if I polled the councillors, they would all tell you that they have command of the village, and particularly so in this issue. And the administrator is not particularly guiding the have your say survey or the results, which are quite plain. But thank you very much for your comments. If you could put your hand down, and if I've got time for one more on the gallery, if you'd like to come forward. Again, just unmute. You don't have to take your camera, put it on. Appears nobody's coming forward. Therefore, thank you very much, gallery, for participating. And we'll go to the schedule, which, and again, CAO, we went through a lot of paperwork yesterday, but I think, and we were doing some jumping around, but I think where we left this was, and this is on the, at the bottom of page 14 of 158, and I don't believe we went to the top of page 15 of 158. Stand corrected, if we could just check your stuff. And if that is the case, if we could carry on just to conclude the
Mayor McLaughlin.
community planning, yes?
Hi, I'm sorry. I was unmuted and for some reason you couldn't hear me.
Okay, if you'll just pause for a second. Mr. Brooke, so to my colleagues, if I can leave you to look at that homework while I ask. Mr. Broughton, you've got the floor for 2.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, I'll try to be very brief. First of all, just number one point in terms of as we're just a couple of points I want to reiterate. And the first is that as we discuss housing in our community, it really requires complete community involvement. So I would hope that any kind of decisions that would involve anything to do with housing would involve complete village consultation. And when I think of the consultation, I think of seeking thoughtful input. And I'm still, after my comment yesterday about the concept of bringing forward a platform called Banging the Table, it just seems completely contrary to getting thoughtful content and really resolving matters. I found it very fascinating that the topic for November the 11th session, Remembrance Day, was peace, and that the discussion there was some very wise words around resolution and reaching agreement, which I think we should be looking at very seriously. I'd just like to thank Council very much for the link that was in the Village Update last week to the BC Lung Association webinar, which took place this morning. Now, unfortunately, there was a power outage, but fortunately, I was able to get on my cell phone. So it was an outstanding presentation on the effects of wood burning. I just want to restate my point that my understanding is that getting a rural certification was not to circumvent air quality by any means. Air quality is very, very important to us all. So, and there's some incredibly important information that came forward in that session this morning, which I don't have time to get into right now. Final point, I just want to reinforce Councillor Abbott's point of points that he's made over time, and that is to look for savings versus, in addition to looking for ways to generate income for the community. By finding savings, there really is a double benefit. First of all, we do not have to raise the funds and seek them. But secondly, we can also find much more effective ways of using things if we're finding savings. So going forward, I would hope that Council would really look at the spirit of saving our planet and really ask the question, how can we do more with less? And that we are looking consistently at at the environment and the impact to the environment, and of course the three-legged stool concept. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Broughton, and we'll close public participation at that. And thank you all to the gallery members, all four of you, for coming forward. So back to where we left this with continuing from last evening. CAO, was I correct or was I off?
Yeah, we're at the top of page 14 now.
We concluded with the emergency program at item J, and I think we didn't flip the page.
So first up is supported community planning, and first item on that list is consider waiving secondary suite utility fees for property owners who rent to firefighters.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I think I already numbered my pages. I apologize. Thank you. Councillor Rabbit,
We study that one.
again, we're doing
yeah.
recommendations and
I
guidance.
get it, yeah. So yes, we've had some discussion on that. I think probably due to bring back a revised suggestion to council in the meeting December the 14th. I think the big question to discuss in this kind of open, free-flowing form is council's sort of, like a better way to put it, council's willingness to sacrifice revenue in the interest of creating more housing for firefighters and generally in form of secondary suites. And although the evidence is anecdotal and there's a lot of debate about how many unused secondary suites are there, the intention was to try to open those up. The second question to consider is whether it should be tied to firefighters, or are we really trying to open up more rental accommodations in the village for other reasons, as we've spoken about many times? And in that case, do we sacrifice all this revenue? And we're talking in round numbers around the low 20s, thousand that is, annually. And is there a net gain to be had there, a net benefit that we see to our sort of strategy for housing in the future in general? And I guess that was the discussion point that we really haven't had yet. Maybe you get a feeling from everyone whether it's sit on that. Pam, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I would add what we were looking for in this meeting was direction from council, because a decision would have to be made. Like as a committee, you can make a recommendation to council. And then at the December 14th meeting, we would have to make a decision if we were going to proceed with waiving the firefighters. And that would be fairly simple to implement. It would just be an additional line on the utility notice. If you've rented to a firefighter, apply the name, and then we would confirm with the fire chief and the fee would be waived. And as well, we would have to change the secondary suite bylaw just to allow that exemption, but that we could easily accommodate the readings for that before. But on the second one, waiving the fee, I do have concerns about that, not discussing it, but I would look to council to making that an objective to look into and investigate in 2022, because there was a committee on this, there was a lot of work done, and it was very clear by that committee that residents were supported at secondary suites if they paid their fair share. And as well, it's in our OCP that secondary suites must ensure that owners make a fair contribution to the cost of the services. So what I would recommend, if that were the case, if we get that council direction, is that we get public consultation in 2022. We could initiate it with the utility bill by putting in a survey or just some information. But the time, I think, is really tight to make a decision like that. There's no way we could get public input before we'd have to make the amendments necessary for the utility fees to go out in February. So that would be my only input, that
So
I
you
think
would
it's
suggest
longer
that
game to waiving the
you
fees.
suggest that for this year we should just the firefighters.
Yeah,
And then, okay, but still, it's a valid conversation to have here
absolutely.
about whether we want to take it further, those benefits. And I think the other thing, part of it, if we relaxed the cost benefit, potentially we get more, and we already have a soft approach to the enforcement of the safety code issues. And I think if we did that, this might be another possibility that people say, well, it's not costing me money. Why don't I go down that path? I'm not taking any risk, right? There's no risk of, oh, you're going to be on a register, we're going to come hunt you down for money. So I think that might help as well. But anyway, so I accept maybe it's a second step if we can't do it fast enough. Good point on the OCP. I think it comes back to me, it's in the OCP. I had forgotten about that. So I guess that would involve public participation first.
Yeah. I think one's a longer game approach, whereas
So we can-
firefighters,
We can bring both those ideas to the 14th for action to go forward.
Yes.
Okay.
So Councillor Rabbit, just to draw us back into your recommendation is that, if I paraphrase this correctly, is that what you would like to see at the 14th meeting as a recommendation come forward, that we waive the charges for renters who rent to firemen for this year or next year, I guess.
Mhm.
And that in 2022, we would consider expanding this, but at this time, nothing. So that's the short recommendation.
Yeah, but I'd like to bring that to the table on the 14th to get a clear path forward. So, yeah.
I think perfect for me. I think in that vein of this started with the firemen. Not every unit is rented by a fireman, but certainly as turnover occurs in the rental market, if firemen are seen as preferred clients because you don't have to pay your utility, clearly the objective of assisting the fire department would be met, and I would be very much in support of that. Councillor Gormaire, your thoughts?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Let them close with Councillor Green.
The firefighters provide an invaluable service. If we can support them locally, I think that's a great idea. I'm on the fence about waiving the fees altogether because you're charging rent, you're making money. There's a service that the village provides, secondary suites, if they're not being rented to firefighters. I think there's more discussion to be had on that.
My recommendation was on the firefighters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think the other one, I'm not there yet. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with everything. Firefighters, that sounds great. And we need to consult the public when it comes to waiving them altogether. But I'm in support of waiving it for firefighters for sure.
Thank you very much. Councillor Green, if you could close this.
I think what you've proposed is a good idea and I'd support it.
Thank you very much. Okay, staff, I think you've got your recommendation. CAO, the next two.
Okay, consider natural hazards development permits and associated OCP amendments, review hazard mitigation grants. Excuse me. So with this one, we had talked about doing a committee of the whole with review of the materials and having somebody come and speak with council about different things that should be considered or could be considered, talking about changing environment and climate change and what it means for our risk hazards and so forth. So materials were circulated. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to proceed with that committee of the whole meeting. The invitation is there for all of you to review those materials and ask any questions in advance if you like. Councillor Barmeyer has done that to begin with, and I don't know if you've got follow-up questions or not, but by all means, I encourage all of you to get through those voluminous materials when you have a chance. And perhaps we can look at setting up a new date to have an initial discussion before requesting some additional presentation materials from a subject matter expert who's very busy now as a result of all the disasters in any event. So was actually quite relieved that he didn't have to spend time getting ready for our presentation. So that's where that sits right now. Any other questions or comments?
CAO, when would you expect at the earliest we might be able to bring this person back, should we choose to?
Well, whenever council's ready to set a date for having a committee of the whole.
I believe council elected not to proceed with this pre-calendared event. for a reason that the majority wanted to talk about the issue before we listen to a subject matter expert. I see no reason to delay that. I think we should do it as quickly as the 14th meeting.
Sorry, the 14th is the council meeting.
Yes.
I think it would be probably prudent, if I may, to have a dedicated committee of the whole meeting to talk about, in an informal setting, just to have a wide-ranging discussion about the material and issues, and get council's thoughts, talk about goals and objectives. There's a whole host of things that I think could be talked about. I don't think it really fits very neatly within the confines of a council meeting. Certainly not enough time to do that without, pushing the council meeting till the wee hours.
Okay. I'll go with the count. Thank you very much. I would rank this, both the CACs and the DPAs, which I'm sure we could do at the same time, as a significant topic in our moving forward in our sustainability. I'd like to see that as early in the new year as we can, and I'll ask the councillors to go around, and we'll go in reverse order this time. Councillors Bain, Cunliffe, Barmayer, and Abbott, if you're in concurrence with that.
Yeah, I think the CAO's ideas are good. I think it's a subject that shouldn't be rushed through, and I think we need to spend some time on it and consider it. So early in the new year is fine with me.
Thank you. Councillor Cunliffe.
Yeah, I would agree with that early in the new year.
Thank you. Councillor Barmayer.
Yep, I'm fine with that.
Councillor Abbott.
Sure, let's do it.
Good. CAO, if we could see this appear on the second meeting in January, that'd be great. By this towards the end of January.
Yeah, how about
Committee of the whole meeting.
we'll look at our calendars and come prepared to set a date at the
You're going to
December
reveal the
14th.
recommended calendar next meeting, so
Yeah,
let's if we could draw a line at that time, if you could take a note for us then.
sit on a date. at
Thank
that
you.
meeting, yeah.
Brunswick, please.
Okay, yeah, so the application for sponsored Crown grant is proceeding for public works yard at the Upper Brunswick site above the Ministry of Transportation's gravel pit. And so we have received an agreement to sponsor from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, which is a great milestone for us. And now it's a case of having further discussions and stick handling this with the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations, as well as with Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. There's lots of sort of overlapping access issues and things of that nature that will have to be sorted out in order to ensure that we have support from the Ministry of Transportation, which will also be fundamental to moving this forward and getting approval.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the CAO on that? I can tell you that progress is very slow, and but with having Minister Osborne on our page, she did come through with us very quickly after our engagement. Councillors, anything on this one? No, good, thank you. I'm going to recommend that we deal with item E and item G as they come up in the reports, staff reports, where they've each got reports and recommendations, so that we don't double up on this.
Sorry.
That is in this session.
Well, it's in the regular session. We have an agenda where we're going to do the housing needs assessment report, and there's also a report on land designation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of just going through this
Okay.
list, and then when there's a report, we just move it
Oh, we
over to
move
the
to it.
report.
Okay,
If that's okay.
that's fine. Good.
Okay, so with respect to the housing needs assessment report, That's on page 25. And so that was a presentation that was provided to us by the authors of the report, Richard White and Associates, and so that package is found in here as well, and basically provides all the data that was required by the provincial government in terms of the legislation. We got a grant to provide this information and to package it up. The requirements outstanding under the program are to receive the information and to forward it to the province and the UBCM via the UBCM to Metro Vancouver. That's the present recommendations that are set out at the beginning of the report.
Thank you very much. We'll go the other way and change it up a bit. And we'll go Councillor Barmare, Councillor Cunliffe, Councillor Bain, Councillor Rabbit. Any comments, any questions?
Yeah, I mean, the same comments I had at the presentation. It's an interesting report. It seems to make sense in Metro with communities that are attached to large infrastructure that can support growth. It doesn't really make sense in Lions Bay because we don't have the ability to flex our infrastructure to support this kind of thing. So while I think it's an interesting report, I don't really have much to say. I don't see how it's super relevant.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. There's very interesting information, but not really much that we can action on. We're really just not qualified to support social housing or anything in this kind of
Thank you. Next.
environment.
Thank you, Councillor Cunliffe. Councillor Bain.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've got mixed feelings about this. I agree with what Councillor Barmare and Cunliffe have said. And I kind of wonder if it's possible to hold off on the report because I think it's based on dated data from an earlier census that's almost 5 years out. And I was just wondering if we could hold it and have it made refreshed with a coming new census next year. I don't know if the timelines would allow for that, but the thing I'm concerned about is because it's a report based on dated data, it could be used to lead us in a direction that doesn't suit this community. So I'd be very cautious on that. So quite frankly, I'm really undecided between the two positions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bain. CEO, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, the deadline for providing this to the province is April of 2022. So we have to submit this information by that date. And everybody else will be in the same boat as us in terms of census data. Anything that was used is going to be somewhat dated. And I think it's just a case of acknowledging and recognizing that. There was some information that seemed, somewhat interesting with respect to Lions Bay in terms of the number of households that were 2 people or less, and in larger homes of 3 or 4 bedrooms or more, and the lack of smaller housing for downsizing was one of the things that seemed to pop out of the report. Whether that's still true today, I don't know, but there hasn't been really much change in our housing stock, nor in the type of housing, and nor, I don't think, in our demographics. Other than perhaps there's a few more families that have more recently come to Lions Bay, but for the most part, it's probably not changed a heck of a lot. But we are under the time constraints of having to comply with the requirements of the program and submit the report to the province and to Metro.
Can I just pass a comment on that? So the status data the census data starts coming out in February. The initial issues in February, I went and looked at stats can. And that is, the way I read it, that is the total population numbers by region, by area, by municipality. So, I mean, not quite sure how the breakdown happens after that. whether we get age demographics and stuff later, or if we get in that first batch. But it wouldn't harm to wait and see that. We don't have to submit this till April. Was my one thought. The other comment I had about the information in the report, and when we had the consultant here, he said he still had time available and budget to come back to us in a follow-up meeting. Are we not intending to do that? Because there's a few other statistics in there that I think I'd like to ask questions on, and we can submit them electronic by paper in advance. And I think we've got an issue doing that.
Sorry, go ahead.
And things like, well, first of all, I don't know, I battle why we use 2016 data for things like house values when we can simply go to BC assessments and get last year's numbers. So that was one thought, why we used old information on that. And then there's the way the report, if I remember correctly, led to this metro expectation, or sorry, was it metro? Who gave it the expectation? It was provincial expectation that we have to grow by 82 houses. That seemed an odd leap. And I think we do need to review the report and not just submit it with things like that in there. If we have to comment on that, comment a little bit more strongly. So, yeah, I thought we were going to have one last go around at that, and whether it is with the consultant room or we just send some questions in, not bothered either way. And I wouldn't see why we wouldn't wait till at least February and see if we do get a better idea on any stats. I do agree with you. I don't think there's going to be a big change in Lions Bay, but anecdotally, I can tell you in my street, 6 houses are sold in the last 5 years, and every single one is a family with kids. And so I think there is a change. Or if our streets, what's happening in the rest of the village, there's definitely going to be a change.
Yeah, I would be curious to see where they get the projection that we're going to add as many households as they say.
It's not based on Lions Bay or any particular area. It's just based on a more global projection.
Yeah,
Everyone needs to do this.
it's not relevant.
No, I think that assessment was out of existing data. It wasn't a projection. And sure, you can project as to where you might want to go in the future. They mentioned that, if you're considering what kinds of policies or strategies you wish to consider going forward, then that's something to take into account. But it's not based on a projection. It's based on the data that they found, whether old or stale or what have you. But it's not. It's the data. It's the existing data. The other thing is, I know that there was money spent on getting census data reports that aren't normally provided. There's lots of things you can get for free, but then there's things that you can pay for. And that was one of the things that they did. So I'm not sure whether that was all of that was 2016 or whether any of that was more recent. But those are certainly questions that I can go back and ask the planning consultants about, and ask them if they would be prepared to come back and discuss it further, answer any further questions.
Okay. Again, we've been doing another time. I was trying to jump to my notes from the previous meeting when we had that, but I guess we don't need to belabor. The other questions were talks about us having an average of less than 2 households, resident people per household, and then he says we need to grow by, I can't remember, it was like 100 and how many people, and then suddenly he uses 2.7 as the number of houses we need to
I remember asking the same question when I saw that figure.
Yeah.
I had the same question I think you had, but the explanation, let's see if I can get that right, is that no, I'm not even going to attempt. But it was a logical explanation in terms of the number of people who had more than that offset the number the ones who had more had it by quite a bit versus the ones who still had a very high percentage of one or two.
So it says here,
CAO, might I ask that you come back on the 14th when we receive this information?
Yep.
Checking your notes.
I can inquire
Councillor
further
Rabbit,
about that.
anything else?
okay, I was just finding those, we'll leave it there. Yeah, there's something odd there, but anyway, okay, we can do it. We can do it another time. We don't have to do it now. But yeah, I think we need one more review of this before we issue it. That's for sure. Okay, pass it on.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll see it on the 14th. Thank you very much. My comment is that anything that I have that's third-party initiated on our community is always useful to me somewhere down the line. So I think with that, CAO, we'll move on to item F.
Okay, so that is just basically terms of things that come up on a regular basis, people contacting staff and inquiring about things like opportunities for subdivision or development, or potential ideas for areas that have been identified already in the OCP for those kinds of things to take place, road ends, all those kinds of different things. So it's just simply to continue facilitating potential opportunities that may fit within the current or future OCP. This is basically answering questions and trying to provide the necessary information for people to decide what they want to do with it.
No, councillors, if there's any questions, ask now, otherwise we'll move on. We'll open mic on this. Councillor Bain, nothing. Councillors at the table, nothing. Good, thank you. Next one.
Okay, the next item is the urban containment boundary with Metro. And
CAO, if I can give you a bit of guidance on this one. Your report is here. We've all read it. We'll let you go through it.
I'm not going to go through it.
I'd like to be short on this, and then we'll go around with the councillors again in a short piece, and we'll move on to the next meeting.
Yeah, I will.
Yep, thank you very much.
Belabor the point here, but I do have a couple of things to say.
Thank you very much.
So I don't have much to add to the report that you have before you, other than to emphasize that there's still much work to be done in order to flesh out the parameters and policies that need to go along with any change in designation from urban to rural. You have my suggestions as to why council ought to strongly consider doing such work as part of the OCP renewal, where the community's vision can be carefully defined so as to ensure there are no external roadblocks preventing the realization of that vision. The decisions required by council in the short term are set out on page 76 of the report. There's A, B, and C. And the only other thing that I'm compelled to add is that I find the desire, quite frankly, to expunge the report from the agenda without review and discussion or debate of the content for such an important matter to be the antithesis of transparency in local governance in a free and democratic society. I've heard lots of talk during these strategy sessions about creativity and being open to finding solutions to the challenges faced by the village of Lions Bay. Yet the core principle of creative solutions, which is open minds and healthy debate, came under attack in an open meeting of a council strategy committee meeting, and I find that very disturbing. Staff provide information and recommendations for council consideration and decision-making. Council doesn't have to accept recommendations when they're put forward by staff, but in the interests of making informed decisions in the best interest of the community, which is council's role, transparency and good governance requires council to receive the information. Do with it what you will, but please don't revert to what is effectively book burning or shoot the messenger because you might not like or agree with the message. And that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you very much, CAO. I will move the rotation to the councillors, and you've got a couple minutes if you want to address your personal thoughts on this. Again, we're going to figure a decision on the 14th. I'll go with Councillor Bain, Councillor Rabbit, I'll go in the middle, and then Councillor Barmere and Councillor Cunliffe. Councillor Bain, if you could unmute. Any comments if you have any?
The only comment I have is I'd like to see action take place in the next open meeting so that we can come to a decision and conclusion on this so that we take positive steps to move towards our end goal, which would be to get out of the urban containment boundary. But I think we need to give the residents some assurance that the 91% of them that are moving us in this way, that they're heard and they're going to be listened to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bain. Councillor Rabbit?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. And first of all, Peter, on the speech you just gave, there might have been some miscommunication on what I thought Councillor Bain was saying yesterday. My intention was not to restrict this report as not being read. I guess I tried to explain that afterwards, but that was not how it got decided. I thought this needed to go to the voting meeting, and we didn't need another round of discussion in the committee of the whole meeting. Maybe we're sort of on cross purposes there. There was no intention not to hear information or to have ears closed to any information we can receive. So I just want to make that statement. Didn't feel we needed a discussion here and another one on the 14th. Thought we had clear direction. I'd been asked to go and work out what the next steps are. I've been asked to keep you informed. We invited you to the meeting. I was ready to come to the 14th with this report attached, with that recommendation. And that was what I'd still like to do. I'd also like to, sorry, 1 second, I lost my train of thought there. I think we'd be doing the residents of participated a complete disservice if we decide that we need to go to a full OCP review as you suggested. And you've already told us once before that that's going to be a $100,000 effort, which you plan to do over 5 years. That is just kicking the can down the road and not dealing with this issue. So I strongly have no interest in that. As to the bylaws that we need to change, I'm not sure what those are. Obviously, the regional context statement needs to change. I'm not sure that there's anything else that needs to change. I think this community has always seen itself and felt itself as rural. I think that's obvious from our first OCP to our OCP review, to the response to the land use master plan, to numerous things that have happened in this village. I think we need to understand that and work towards making this happen. And like Councillor Bain, if we need to go to the 14th to decide what the next step is, I think that's where we should do it. But I think it's time. And I don't, and through the mayor, I don't necessarily agree with the statement you made earlier when you said if I polled my councillors. I don't agree with that necessarily. I don't think that's reflective of the view of all of the councillors or how we should do that.
Thank you, Councillor Rabbit. I'll speak for a minute, and then Councillor Barmere and Councillor Cunliffe. All of council agreed to conducting a survey. You have your say. There are 3 issues that concern me. Firstly, I believe the Metro wood burning apparatus bylaws that apply in 11 years if we remain in urban was a great influence on the survey outcome. The large number of people who participated in the wood burning survey and their extremely clear views, and many public presenters more recently indicate as much to me. Secondly, the survey did not address any pros or cons of urban versus rural with respect to development opportunities. My recommendations on this topic to be included in the disclosure hit the cutting room floor. The most recent mayor's message I wrote a couple of weeks ago is very granular detail outlined our financial sustainability needs and various housing desires and requirements. I will not consider leaving the urban designation until there is finite clarity that doing so would give us no less authority to guide our own future. We need to engage with the community to develop clear policies around what future development should look like for Lions Bay and define our designation accordingly, whether rural or rural, whether urban or rural. To be clear, I'm fine with being rural, provided that the vision to be developed with Lions Bayers can be defined this way. This has not been addressed yet. Lastly, what's the rush? With wood burning apparatuses not an issue for over a decade, autonomy with an undefined designation change, an unknown, and not directly engaging the public in any formal way on the whole topic of development and housing, I simply don't see it. A formal community engagement on many topics via an OCP seems most appropriate to me. This is an information session. I said in September that involvement in this issue would suck the wind out of council and derail us from focusing on key goals. I don't want to see this happen. I would like to see the necessary community engagement take place through the OCP renewal process under the new council at the end of next year. Thank you. Councillor Barmer.
Can I just pass a comment through the chair? This is open committee of the whole meeting. Last night you started off by telling us we've got no time for electioneering speeches. Now I'm sitting and listening to prepared speeches. It's a committee of the whole meeting. Let's talk to each other.
I just did. Councillor
No,
Barmer.
you didn't talk. You read a prepared speech. That's not a discussion point. And for your rotation, Councillor Barmer was going to go next, and the next thing we got another election speech. And I think you do this committee, this village a disservice if you honestly believe that they don't know what this is about, they didn't have enough information, and you think we're going to kick down the road for another 5 years.
So where are you getting the 5 years from, Councillor?
Well, because in the previous meeting, it was suggested we save $20,000 a year to save up to do the next OCP review. That was the suggestion you put forward.
That was per year for 4 years, then that was suggested at the very beginning of your term. So that at the end of your term,
it was suggested last year.
It was brought up again last year.
Okay, so then we can do it. So we can do it in the next. What do you suggest? We're going to do it in the next
thing that it start with the first order of business of the new council.
Of the new council.
Just begin.
And I don't think we should push this down to the new council.
You're not going to get it done in 6 months. It's not possible.
There's no reason why we cannot get it. We had a meeting with
an OCP. No, I'm not talking about the expedited process.
I'm talking about
an OCP. I thought we were talking about a full OCP because you mentioned 5 years. It's not 5 years. It's next year.
Okay.
Or at the end of next year, and then it'll take a year. That's all.
Okay, so full OCP review is then at best 2 years away, and it's going to cost us $100,000
a year, and take a year. And
we're going to start it in a year's time.
So yeah.
1 + 1 is 2.
And it's going to take
okay. So it's at least two complete. It's at least 2 years away. It's at least 2 years away.
And what's going to happen in the meantime?
In the meantime, I think
is anything detrimental going to happen as a result of not taking a step at this point in time?
Well, we don't know what's detrimental could happen. I mean, we already have David Eby talking about areas inside the urban containment boundary being forced to have social housing. There's been the talk about, and that's in the 2050 plan as well, by the way, up to 50% social housing. We're inside the urban containment boundary. There's been talk about protecting the tree canopy on private residences inside the urban containment boundary. I don't know what's coming next, but I think Councillor Barmeyer called it the canary in the coal mine, or someone did. And I think you read the 2050 plan, Metro intends to use that designation for future bylaw enforcement that are probably not going to fit well with Lions Bay. We've had to have your say. We've spoken to residents. I think that I am convinced, and I think they know what this is about. And I think we're ready to make this decision and move on.
Well, Councillor Rabbit, you've got to repeat yourself twice, so we'll move on to Councillor Barmer.
Yeah, I mean, I have some thoughts about this. What we're doing now is trying to prioritize initiatives, allocate resources, allocate staff time to priorities. So in the context of that, I see why it's listed under supported community planning. It's very important to the residents, but there's a whole number of other issues that we have to deal with. And so in terms of where it falls in the priority of things, I don't see it as a high priority. I do think we've heard the message from residents loud and clear that we're in a rural community. It feels rural to me. It's partially why I moved here. I feel like I'm in the country, and my coworkers talk about me living in the country. So, you know, strictly by the definition of the word, it feels like we're a rural community. So there's no, you know, for me, it's that is obvious. The machinery of making that transition from general urban to rural is out of my depth, and I'm not going to talk about that or debate that. That's not something I understand enough about, and I'll just be honest about that. One of the fundamental issues that I see is that a lot of this is based on community assets that are shared in a big region, most of those being water and sewer, and we simply will not or ever have that benefit of being part of that broader community and leverage that very, very expensive piece of infrastructure, drinking water and sewer. We just don't have that to our benefit. So when they look at these regional issues, that's kind of a cornerstone of growth. It's a cornerstone of all kinds of things. It's a cornerstone of climate action, and doesn't apply to us. So there's a fundamental disconnect there. And again, I think we've heard residents, they're clear about their message. I don't see the urgency personally. I think this can be kept bookmarked and something we keep an eye on, but I don't think it's a short-term issue personally.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barmier. Councillor Cunliffe, you get the joy of closing this conversation.
Well, I would say that we've heard from the residents. It's very clear. It was not a 60-40. It's over 90%. For Councillor Barmier's points, we will never have access to sewer. We will never have access to water. I do think there is a canary in the coal mine. We have no idea what sort of bylaws can be presented to us and enforced upon us. And by Metro's definition, we don't even come close to falling into urban. We fall into rural. Now, as for an OCP review and defining what rural means to Lions Bay, well, that's a wonderful notion, but it is not applicable to how we fall into the urban containment boundary. So we gave Councillor Abbott direction to move ahead and see what the next steps are, and that's what I'm in support of. The residents have spoken, and that our role here is to represent them. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. And
the next steps, Councillor Cunliffe, were laid out in the report. So Councillor Abbott has determined what those next steps are. I was on the call with him, with the Metro Director of Planning. And so those are laid out here. There's basically two options. You can do a minor amendment, which is
I understand, Peter. I don't want to sound disrespectful, but what that sounds like a discussion we should be having at the next council meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, councillors. And CAO, if we could go to the next topic, which is the EV.
So electric vehicle charging station, and I added the word strategy. It was something that had come up at one point in our previous discussions about where to go for grants, and we seem to be having the grants dictate to us what our strategy should be instead of the other way around. And I just wondered whether, you know, I apologize, I haven't been to all the CAC meetings, so I don't know if it's been talked about in terms of trying to get a big picture view of where Lions Bay should go with electric vehicle charging infrastructure, because it's coming down the pike fast. And I think probably that's something that needs to be really determined where to go. You know, what's it going to look like in 10 years? Are we going to have the infrastructure that we need? Where is it going to be? You know, is it level 2 primarily, and then 1 or 2 level 3s? Where are they? That kind of thing. And that might very well, particularly at a point in time where we're seeing difficulty in terms of having enough cash to move forward with infrastructure projects, to perhaps set out a strategy that tackles the less expensive level 2s as a preliminary step was one thought. And then, you know, as things change, I can't imagine that there won't be more and better grant funding for these things coming down the pike to make sure that everybody is able to transition because government has clearly indicated that's where we're going. So they're going to have to support it. It's just at this time, it seems like a challenge, and maybe it's partly a challenge because we don't have a strategy. And so I just wonder if that's something that ought to be addressed.
Yeah.
Can I,
say
sorry,
something?
just before you start, can I just go back? I was looking at the board and I saw the resonances here. Can I go up to the previous discussion? We are in agreement in December 14th meeting. I will be bringing a recommendation for the next steps.
I believe that was
Okay.
the long and
I
short.
was just wondering if we closed the loop there because I was looking up at the board and the number of residents spoke earlier about that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so if I could say a few things about this, you know, in the context of priorities and the way we had, you know, put this table together, this has been on council's agenda for over 2 years, and we made a commitment as the council to look into providing zero emission energy alternatives for people in general. We sought to align ourselves with the federal mandate and with the provincial mandates that have been in place for many years now. ZVIP is the latest round of grants that the feds have put out. It's 2022 to 2026. And what I discovered last year, and to be frank, I was quite disappointed that, you know, the way industry can move and the way government can move is quite different. And the grants come out with a very specific set of requirements. And we simply weren't able to flex our budget to meet the last round of requirements. Our buy-in was too high, and that's fine. We can accept that. So in terms of what I was expecting this strategy to be was that we look at what the next round of grants requirements are, and we decide as a council if we can meet those. Because our budgeting year isn't always going to align with when these grants come out and what our buy-in is going to be. But we do know that generally it's a 75% grant. So we know we get roughly 50% from the feds, we get another 25% from the provincial government. And in terms of strategies, that's already been thought about at both the federal and municipal level, federal and provincial level. They have a broad strategy for zero emissions. So those grants are meant to address different strategies at the time that the grant comes out. So the next round of grants comes out in January, and as a council, we need to look at that and ask ourselves if there's some alignment there, if we can take advantage of the offering at the time. It might be something that supports municipal infrastructure, for example, charging at municipal facilities or charging at municipal parks. There'll be a good reason for that because it makes sense from the broader federal strategy, it makes sense from the provincial strategy. So what I'm suggesting is that we look at this closer to budget time and we allow a bit more flex on what we budget for our 25% buy-in. And then we look at it. We look at the grant, we look at the potential revenue streams, we look at the GHG offsets at the time. We will have to mobilize a bit quickly because the turnaround on those grants and our ability to submit is limited. Usually you have only 3 or 4 months to pull a grant application together. But I think the payback is huge, both in terms of our contribution to the climate emergency, our contribution to greenhouse gas reduction, and our potential for a future revenue stream. It's widely known that zero emission fuels are now a place for people to generate revenue. You just have to look around. It's an opportunity we have as a community, and it pays back threefold. So I'm suggesting we look at this at our budgeting time, and we have a serious conversation about what we're willing to do for buy-in for some zero emission alternatives in landscape.
Sounds good. Brilliant. I think we struggled before. We tried to justify it on how a timeline over how it would pay itself back, and then maybe we need to give some credit to a bigger picture and the climate emergency as well. And the last time it was purely, show me you can pay it back in 5 years and you're going to make money. But maybe the conversation needs to be a little wider than that.
Yeah, I think needs to be less focused on how much it's going to cost. It takes money to make money. So if we need to put the money out it is going this way, we're going to get left behind. So
but you know, there are also other pressing priorities.
Absolutely. No, I
Absolutely.
recognize that. I recognize that. I think there's a strong business case here, and maybe not in the short term, but in the long term, this will be a revenue stream. We will be a purveyor of green energy if we go down this path, and we can be proud of that.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Barmeyer. Councillor Bain.
And now,
I
so the
know.
timing is perfect.
Perfect.
Next meeting, CAC,
Yeah.
we'll work on it in January, present in February.
Councillor Bain, we're doing the Kumbaya song in here, so we'll let you close on this one.
I have nothing to harmonize with that.
That's probably best. Thank you very much. And I think the next one is also Councillor Barmeyer. Get ready for this. It's coming back to you again.
Right, okay, so what we have here, and Jamie, you're gonna have to back me up a bit. We, at the last CAC meeting, which was held November 22nd, we put together a list of items we'd like council to consider as they pertain to climate action initiatives. So we've got a list here, it's on table, and it's basically ranked 1 through 10 things we'd like to talk about at
We get it by email as well, didn't we?
sorry?
I feel I've seen it. Do we get it by email as well? Or not?
Yeah, there's an email from with
Is that on
this.
the table?
Yeah, that's the piece.
Okay.
One of the sort of what we identified as what we consider low hanging fruit was the concept of renewable diesel. I know there's been some back and forth there, but just sort of the long story short, the city of Vancouver has adopted renewable diesel to a standard that's acceptable to most vehicle OEMs. The city of Vancouver typically does their homework. They are a leader in climate action, and I think we can take a lot of confidence from that decision. So with that in mind, I think this is probably one of the easier and sort of low-hanging fruit in terms of GHG reductions that Lions Bay can take. The second piece was the purchasing policy, which I see is already on under the financial goals. B, we talked about working with departments on climate action committee to draft the new purchasing policy. So that one's captured as an immediate term goal. So I'm quite pleased to see that. The third is a plan to zero emission roadmap, where the ask would be really staff time to kind of get a baseline of where we are now and how do we get to zero emissions. So it's some research and it's cooperation with staff. Simon's brought in the concept of city studios, which is sort of an academic opportunity to work with a group that looks at these kinds of things to help communities develop a plan to zero emissions. I don't think it's a big ask in terms of dollars. It might be an ask in terms of staff time. So whether that's short term, or medium term, I think this is a good initiative to support. The fourth being the EV chargers. We've talked about that just now. I think we can be rest assured we'll have further discussion at budget time about that and where that goes. We've got a strong mandate. Again, we've got a federal mandate, we've got a provincial mandate, and we have a municipal mandate from the Climate Action Committee to support this. So there's no question about whether this initiative is supported by the community. The fifth being the community hall retrofits. Longer term scope of work development, and the resource being staff time for scope pricing and life cycle analysis. So I know this is a bigger ask, but again, something I'd like to consider to look at as a group. And then there's a few others that sort of fell off as being short-term goals. Methane capture would require some longer-term technical investigation off the Calvin Grove treatment plant, whether there was any opportunity to harvest some of that and take advantage of that energy. The general concept of feeding back into the grid through micro turbines, if we're doing PRV replacement, we talked about that a little bit yesterday with some of the water main replacements and the fact that we have stored energy in our water mains, and whether there is an opportunity to harvest some of that energy and feed it back to the grid for potential revenue stream. The eighth being just a concept that we might end up covering under the procurement strategy, which is the electrification of existing internal combustion engine machinery. So as they come up to end of life, sort of the first line of defense being replacing them with an electric motor as opposed to replacing them with another internal combustion engine. So just a concept. The ninth being the ice stupas, which was meant to address our potential water issues. It's an interesting and sort of a theoretical concept, but something we might want to pay some more attention to. And the last one being, and I think Councillor Cum is fairly straightforward, is the transfer station. And you probably have more to say than I do on that.
Yep, that is NI is keeping me abreast of the negotiations and what we will be able to collect here and turn into revenue as well. I was encouraged to see in West Vancouver last week on Garbage Day that they had a pink soft plastic curbside recycling bin. And then I saw a light purple colored one. I didn't get to see what it was, but there's definitely more options to recycle locally, which is great, keeping people off the road. And I think that with the renewable diesel norm, if you could just correct me, Clara had let us know that if we did convert to renewable diesel, that might reduce our GHG emissions by 90%.
Yep.
So that is, you know, knocking it out of the park in the sense if we can get that going in the short term. And then the last 10% we've got time to work on. So I don't think I have much more to add to that.
Renewable diesel one, I mean, I've been copied on some of the emails back and forth with Claire. I think Nye and Clara need to compare notes, I think, and maybe see if we can find you know, where the gaps are and get to some sort of consensus.
Yeah.
So what makes sense? Now we're talking about blends and 50%. And the warranties are okay on the list of vehicles or list of companies, but these are the ones we've got. And so a bit of a closed loop there, I think, so that council don't have to wade through too much of it and get a real.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the issue, the point that I'm trying to make is I think it's a discussion that we should continue to have with staff, and we should continue to look at this as a viable option to reduce greenhouse gas reductions.
Yeah, I think if Nye's report and Claire's subsequent comments could be sort of combined in some way, streamlined, and see if we can get some sort of consensus with the numbers. Will be easier for the rest of us trying to understand all the emails back and forth.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call it immediate term. I would say this is a short-term thing. We need to continue to talk about it, but it's a viable option. And if the city of Vancouver is doing it, we should pay it some heed.
Yeah.
So did we want to go through or have Nye speak to any of the stuff in his report, or just leave that as information? You know, there are some points that Clara notes in her email about, you know, it may be a case of it's going to take some more months of data collection before manufacturers can approve stuff. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nye, but at this point in time, there isn't actually any tolerance to start blending without affecting warranties and so forth. Maybe I got that wrong.
No, that's correct. So there's no tolerance for blending. I will also note that all of the material that I've seen is coming from manufacturers of R100 fuel. So the suppliers and the manufacturers of that fuel. When I've looked into the equipment manufacturer side, it's a different story. For example, with Cummins, who supply diesel engines for tractors, loaders, generators, etc. The engines that they have certified for use for renewable fuels, like the R100 that Vancouver City is using, is only for newer engines. It's not for older engines. And on the Cummins engines website, they say paraffinic fuels, which are R100 fuels, have a density lower than petroleum and result in lower energy content by volume, resulting in increased fuel economy or reduced fuel economy and reduced engine power. So from Public Works perspective, our concern is the ability to do our job with the equipment that we have, and making sure 100% that using renewable fuels in our backhoes, in our trucks, isn't going to compromise the warranties for the newer equipment, and for the older equipment functionality. And that's primarily why we recommend going with a professional, so we can get some stamp, a stamp or assurance from a professional in the field that this stuff is good for our engines. And I know Norm talks about the city of Vancouver and the fact that they're a large organization and cutting edge when it comes to green. They also have a fleet budget that's multi-million dollars. They have, you know, their mechanic department is huge. They have mechanics on for just trucks, for buses, for police cars. We don't have any mechanics on staff. So we can't monitor our equipment and determine if something's going awry. For us, using that fuel in older equipment could result in issues that would probably be headed off at the pass with Vancouver's mechanical group. The other issue is with the delivery. So Vancouver has an engineering department that looks at every fuel batch that's delivered. They review all of the points and compare them to ASTM. And if the fuel doesn't meet, they refuse that batch. So in terms of using it, there would be operational issues that we would have to face and come to terms with. It's not that we don't want to use this fuel. Public Works is on board. It's our hesitancy is born purely from our ability to provide the service that we do provide, and wanting to ensure that that can continue. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Works Manager. I'll leave it with the twin chairs where you want to go with this. Quickly editorializing, the points have been made. We're going to go to a budget discussion. There's some prioritization. And I think the Works Manager has covered this particular aspect. Where would you like to go, or shall we call it a day here?
Oh yeah, I'm not suggesting we do anything without open eyes. I just still think it's worth exploring further, and there's good contacts being made. So
good. Thank you very much then. Thank you, Works Manager. Thanks to both of the co-chairs on this one. Yeah, item J.
Further develop the emergency program to maintain our municipal legal obligations and policy objectives, including completion of evacuation plan and fire smart initiatives. So there's a report at page 113 of the package from Mr. Whitney. In it, he provides an update on where things are at with the evacuation annex, and where things are at with respect to staff and EOC volunteer training. And so, yeah, staff are going to be trained up on the new equipment and the new setup that we have temporarily in the staff meeting room in December next week. And the EOC volunteer group, he's arranging to do the same thing shortly thereafter. ESS volunteer group, he talks about where they're at in terms of updating their courses and so forth. And then what the balance of that report lists where we've come in the last little while with Mr. Whitney and the accomplishments of the program. over the past year or two, couple of years. Suggestions for future direction. He notes that we do have, at some point, the Integrated Partnership for Regional Emergency Management in Metro, IPRA, will be coming back to the disaster debris management issues and the plan updates that are required. We've got some ways to go on that still for Ryan's Bay. Training and exercise updates, his thoughts on that, business continuity plan, emergency communication annex, and document review, and so forth down the road. Hope this sort of brings us up to date on those things. And in the short term, we are looking to complete the evacuation planning that has begun, and the training for EOC and ESS.
Thank you very much, CAO. I think if I'll go first, then I'll go Councillor Rabbit, Barmere, Cunliffe, and Bain. I think if I was to lump our personnel, our volunteers, the program, the ESS, the EOC into one little ball called emergency for preparedness, for lack of a better term, I would rank this as amongst the top, and I mean very top of our must-haves immediates for 2022. I think some of the information's here. I think Councillor Rabbit said some of our volunteers are in a fragile state. Clearly, we need to do more to get to where we want to go before an event occurs that we're not prepared for. So I suspect that this will be coming forward to council pretty much every month in the next year. Councillor Rabbit?
Thank you. Yes, there was an ESS meeting last night. Myself and Councillor Bain attended it. Very, very poorly attended. To say one new member and Councillor Bain and Jan Schneider, and that was it. There was no one else in attendance. So it's definitely in a fragile state, and I don't think we made a whole lot of progress on the training. There wasn't any numbers in this report, but I think we need to understand it and definitely have some work we need to do there. This report starts with a suggestion that these are the things that God will complete before the completion of his tenure with the village. Is that in the December, Peter, or is that date decided? How much time do we have here?
Yeah, just sort of 2 to 3 weeks left in December before Christmas. So we're trying to get as much of that done as possible.
Okay. So yeah, what I'd definitely like to see is some hard numbers on how many EOC guys have trained and who's done what, as well as the ESS. I think we're pretty sure the ESS ones are definitely lacking. What we need, if we had to put up an ESS right now, we pretty much couldn't do one. So that's a big concern for me. I do agree that this needs to be right up top as one of the top priorities we need to do. And I think I spoke to Councillor Bain last night, and the two of us have said we'll reach out to the volunteers who most of them came to us through the recruitment process in the beginning. Reach out to them and just see if they're still on board and what we've got. We'll do that in a short order, phone each one individually between us. And there'll be something in the December 14th meeting. And I think we need an EP meeting really soon. And probably even before Christmas. I think initially I thought maybe we have one in January, but I think we should have an EPC before the year's out. And I do agree with this. That's going to be a monthly update to get us to where we need to be.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rabbit. I feel the situation is grim, but I think that the tremendous effort that's been exerted through the period during a pandemic and attraction of numbers, there's some positives here. I just think, as I said last night, we need to bring this baby home.
Yeah, Yeah, sorry, I tend to focus on what needs to be done and not what's done. I'm not saying we haven't made progress.
Yeah, I know.
We had a lot of volunteers and we've made progress, and the plan is getting closer. We just need to, I think, let's not use the word get it around the second base and home.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Barnard and Councillor Conlon and Councillor Bain to close.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is worth sharing with the community, just so they understand where we're at, that we're looking for help. And absolutely, I think this is an important issue to keep moving.
Thank you, Councillor Conlon.
Yeah, 100%. Considering the natural disaster that's occurring all around us, it kind of highlights the importance of this and the urgency. So
Thank you very much, Councillor Bain.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there as well. For me, it's a really high priority. The interesting thing about it is Neville and I talked to some of the volunteers that have stood up to our, or well, not stood up to it, but you know what I mean, that responded to our appeal for volunteers. We've got some very good quality residents here that I think if managed properly, they could make a tremendous contribution to what we're doing or what we're hoping to do. And I think Neville and I would like to continue working with them and just see what can come of it, and make a proposal to council once we've got some more definitive ideas flushed out. But yeah, it is kind of onerous to look at what our situation is right now. But I've got a lot of hope for this community coming together and really dig deep and make something of it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rabbit? Oh, you're
No,
good?
I was just giving Fred a
Good.
thumbs up.
He's doing the reverse thumb there.
Go for
Councillor
it.
Bain.
Yeah, I'm doing reverse.
So
remote.
you're paving new ground here, Councillor Rabbit. Thank you very much. So I think on that, so you've got council's feedback on that CAO. We would like to have this continually on the agenda. And this is in the immediate category. Thank you very much. Next up, which is item K, if you could lead us on that.
So that one is consider mutual and automatic aid agreements for SLRD Area D, that's Tanya and Furry Creek, and Metro Area A, which is Ocean Point, Strachan, and Montes Ambert. So there was a detailed fire report that Metro commissioned this past year, and we met with them and with there was consultations with West Vancouver as well. And not so much us and West Van as Metro and West Van, Metro and us. And we're from some of the residents there as well. So we're I think with the fire department, with a Lions Bay Fire Rescue department, we're probably close to examining what an automatic aid agreement might look like with Ocean Point. Still have some hurdles with respect to the other two. With respect to Britannia Furry Creek, Fire Chief met with Britannia Fire Department to get up to date on where they were at with the training that they've been done. They've got a new fire chief who's been with them for a while and has worked with for Metro previously, and also learning what sort of development plans are in the works in Furry Creek in particular, as well as Britannia Beach. There's a lot of things going to be happening shortly there by the sounds of it. And so understanding what that looks like is sort of where we're at right now in terms of furthering those discussions. That's about it. A moment for that.
I'm sure we all have mutual aid questions like top of our tongues, but I'm going to guess not. So thank you for the good work on that. This protects us as well too.
Just one comment. I actually didn't even realize Furry Creek had a fire department. So what sort of fire department do they have there?
Britannia Beach?
Quite a good one.
I thought you said Furry Creek.
No, but
No.
it's the Britannia Beach Fire Department covers
Furry Creek.
Britannia Beach and Furry Creek. Yeah, they have some residents that live in Furry Creek.
Although for their development, Furry Creek has been tagged with building a $9 million fire department building.
Well, I think that's, yeah, I mean, it's building apparatus and a bunch of other
Somewhere
stuff.
down the road, but
The challenge, I think, will be members
yeah, well,
and
and thank you,
training and
SLRD,
so
for that.
forth, so.
There we go.
Long way to go. Next item,
Number L.
adopt new local building bylaw complying with new provincial building act and advancing municipal policy objectives. This has been here for a bit. I recognize that. The landscape, meanwhile, has been changing a bit as well. I believe the province has now got everybody needing to shortly, if not already, comply with step code 3. There are additional things that we can look at in terms of incentivizing GHG reduction initiatives. We can't regulate necessarily those kinds of things because the province has taken that power away from local government, put it in the new building act. But we can look at ways in which we can incentivize the building industry if we so choose. If council chooses to go down that path. But the key, I think, is to find communities that have made advancements in that direction and to pull together a list of potential policies that we can look at and what that looks like for Lions Bay. Perhaps have some consultations with local builders and get some feedback from them. But also in terms of a new building bylaw for Lions Bay, I think we also need to look at minimizing the scope of our inspections. That's also a trend, especially for small communities. A heavier reliance on engineering schedules and certifications and minimizing what the municipality is responsible for. But still trying to streamline it so that things move through at a good pace as they do now. Those are just my thoughts on where that's at and what we ought to look at doing next.
What is the expectation on step code 3? Is there a timeline, deadline? Have we missed it?
Yeah.
It's one of these ones that keeps.
Yeah, I know that everybody's not in lockstep on where things are at, and some are way up front, and some are lagging behind and catching up. I don't have specifics for you tonight. Been a little while since I looked at the regulatory evolution of this matter. So that's still got to be looked at, and I can answer your questions perhaps shortly.
Okay.
Any other questions or we'll move on?
Have the CAC had any discussions about step code 3 and what they think?
No, not explicitly.
Probably should as well at the same time, soon after.
Okay. Develop boulevard encroachment bylaw to address encroachments and vegetation. That too has been there for a bit. I think that we do need to make headway on that. I think it will help in terms of some of the issues that we're running into on some of the encroachments. We've tried to streamline our documentation, but now we need to streamline the process and clearly set out what the expectations are, what's permitted, what the process is, and so that people have a clear understanding of what's required. And so we'll try to put something together for council's review sooner than later.
Do you have a comment?
Pardon me?
I do. Are we gonna open to comments?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I just want to be, I understand the need to have a process in place, and I respect that, and I suspect there's good technical reasons for that. But I would like us to think about framing it in a sort of friendly neighbor type perspective, and something that incentivizes beautification of the village, because there's lots of benefits to the community if we have people taking their time, taking their personal money, and beautifying the boulevard. It's of a benefit to the entire community. So there's two ways of looking at this. And while I understand that there's some, infrastructure constraints, and there might be, water mains running underneath certain sections of a boulevard, the idea really is to make Lions Bay a beautiful place to live and a friendly place to live. So I would like us to put that lens on that particular boulevard encroachment bylaw, so that we encourage people to do exactly what they're doing now. You go up with Lions Bay and it's a beautiful place to go for a walk. It's a beautiful road to drive up because people care about their boulevards and they're investing time and money and energy into those. So I really would like us to pay respect to that, encourage that.
My only comment would be to address the safety issues that have been pointed out by resident Charlie Bradbury, where she'd shown areas that should have been kind of safe pedestrian passage that have been maybe gotten a little bit out of hand. So a blend between, it's not that we want to rip your hedge out, but the kids and pedestrians need a safe place to walk as well.
Yes.
Councillor Bain, any comment? We're not forgetting you.
Yeah, I'd like Councillor Cunliffe's comment. I feel quite strongly on it. Where we're at, we're on the road to the school, and I think staff have opened up the boulevards a little more to get cars to move over. And I think that was a great step, and it's made it a lot safer. And it would be nice if we could continue that in other areas as well. But I realize it's a cost. So anyhow, kudos on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rabbit, any closing comments?
Yeah, I have some hesitancy on this. And I think to Councillor Barmeyer's suggestion, we should emphasize sort of beautification, whatever word you used. Sometimes beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and there are large sections of the village where people have private land and have a house within a forested area. And because others would prefer to see, trimmed and tweezers lawns, that's not always what all residents want to see. And I think if you drive around the village and just look at the kind of parts that still look like a forest, give some thought to what that means when you write this boulevard bylaw. I think that I think we need to keep in mind that not all parts of the village look the same. And if the suggestion that all of the village should look like Lions Bay Avenue, I disagree. If that's what the suggestion is. So you just got to be careful. It's not one size fits all in this bylaw. It's got some pitfalls.
I agree, and I think that's going to be that'll be the tricky part of doing this. But certainly, I think that in those areas that are sort of more or less in a natural state, and that's the desire of the adjacent property owner. I think really what we would try to concentrate on is probably the infrastructure aspects. If there's overhead wires or things that need to be attended to that aren't being adequately addressed by BC Hydro, or safety considerations in terms of sightlines and avenues for places for kids to walk safely and pedestrians to walk safely. So I take your point and agree with you that that's definitely something we've got to consider, is the wide variety of streetscapes and landscapes that people have throughout the village. Not one size will fit all at all, by any means.
Thank you very much. CAO and OP.
Yeah, so intra-regional transit. I think that's just a case of maintaining our contacts with the relevant parties, planners at both TransLink and and BC Transit, as well as political contacts and the people that you speak with, Mr. Mayor, at your TransLink meetings. Just to make sure that our ear is to the ground if that file starts to move, which it might, and ensure that we're not forgotten in that process. That will be really important. Any questions on that, or?
Just a question over, are we in discussion with Squamish and Whistler at all?
Not really. I haven't been a long time since I talked to anybody there about transit. Used to be my file when I was at the SLRD. So pretty familiar with all the considerations that they're thinking about and what the model looks like for funding, which, I'm not sure where they evolved that to, because the province sort of wasn't happy with that model.
That was a gas tax they were proposing.
tax,
It got kiboshed. Yeah.
So I'm not sure what's changed or why some people might think that it's, going to move soon. Maybe the province has come around. I don't know. But yeah, I just think that it's important for us to keep our ears open.
Thank you.
Work with TransLink on service improvements to Lions Bay Transit. We did have some things in the works prior to the pandemic coming along in terms of increased hours and service improvements. All that kind of got waylaid. And it's been sort of a gradual climb back to service levels. I think we're still a long ways off from where we were prior to the pandemic. So I think it's a case of just staying in tune with what the processes that TransLink has for service improvement budgets when they come out, and seeing where we're at for Lions Bay to ensure that at the very least in the short term we maintain our service levels, and then in the long term look for improvements. Any questions on that?
On that, I can add to CEO DeJones. I mean, we're punching above our weight on this. Let's not hide the fact that we're the lowest ridership in Metro Vancouver, not by a little bit. With a recognize the smaller municipalities that have granted us, as the pandemic moves on, increased bus services in the summer. I'm working with them on a potential, let's call it the Hiker Express, for lack of a better word, where it dovetails, not where it currently doesn't, on the North Shore other bus routes, so that hikers can come to the Lions early in the morning versus being here at a brisk 10:30 to begin their 8-hour hike. So that's in the works. It seems to resonate with them. And so that's an ongoing. I'll bring that back to council as it gets fleshed out more.
Can I just make a comment that partially probably because of we have the lowest ridership because the service is inadequate to once an hour. You can't get into West Van before the first bus is at like 9:45 on a Saturday or a Sunday. The last bus home, like it's not user friendly. I would just drive because it's not worth the time and effort. So increased buses in the summer is great, so people can come out here and go cliff jumping, but it's not serving our residents. That's my comment on that.
I look forward to your written comment so that I can go back to the one I deal with the CEO, the managing director, and the other 4 municipalities on January the 6th.
Okay. Which brings us back to the table with Squamish and Whistler.
Which I can tell you, in speaking with the mayors over the last 6 months, the subject doesn't come up at all.
Oh, I'm sure that our transit issues are not important to them at all.
No, in terms of discussing other mayors and a unified front pushing this forward. And my most recent discussion with Kevin Quinn, CEO of TransLink, it's somewhere out there, but this requires so much leadership from the province, which just simply isn't there.
challenge.
There we go.
They want us out of our cars.
Thank you. Highway noise. Let's close with that.
So some of that is political advocacy with powers that be, but as well, staff working, staying in touch with VoLB staff on plans for addressing when the pavement will be redone. So I have an answer on that. Ongoing. And any questions or comments before we move on? We've done informed and engaged public communications, strong village organization. So we've got the first item on that is build relationships with First Nations and method of acknowledgement of traditional territory still to be determined. Had some discussion about that at council, and there seemed to be a consensus that it needed to be something meaningful and not simply something rote. So I think that we probably need to take some steps in terms of looking into what does a meaningful acknowledgement look like, and finding out from the First Nations in our area, in terms of the traditional territories, how they feel about it, what resonates with them, and maybe we can get some ideas on that and narrow the scope of our focus and have a discussion about that in the not too distant future, or in the immediate term. Questions or comments on that?
I think my comment is I'm meeting via, wherever I am with Minister Osborne, who's going to be actually addressing this topic with other senior government people, and it gives us an opportunity for me to seek their advice on this. I'm sure they'll go offline with me and get some. We have connections to the Squamish band, which unfortunately in the last 6 months, for a variety of reasons, while I've been in the same room as the key people, we have not been able to be introduced to each other. So I take this as a serious matter, and I will take personal responsibility to do something in the next 6 months and keep council posted on
that. Item B is more or less just an operational update on things that we look to do all the time on a regular basis, whether it's training, courses, webinars, seminars, in a variety of different matters. It's always ongoing. I should say ongoing, actually, instead of short term. And then the last item is consider right opportunity for community plan of Providence Bay. And that would be perhaps a discussion to have at budget time. And so that pretty much completes the items that have been listed in the schedule and on the agenda. I'm not going to go through the miscellaneous projects and core work. It's just some of the items that are sort of on that bulletin board of things that we're always looking at and looking to bring forward at the opportune times. If anybody has any questions on any of those things, please let me know.
Thank you very much, CEO. We'll just, before we go away, I'll give council members an opportunity, if in doing a quick review of yesterday and this evening's topics, if there's something you'd like to go back on and ask a question, or make a point on, please do so now. We'll wait for a second, and if not, we'll move on to the next piece of the agenda. Nothing. Thank you very much. The next part is we've gone through all of the staff reports. The next one is Mayor, Council, and Committees. I have nothing to report. Council members, is there anything you would like to add?
No, I think the committees I've been involved with are all up to date in the last council meetings. I think on the Bear Smart team, I think we need consideration to forming the committee. A huge priority. I think the group did really well this year. We dodged the bullet that was looming and a bear that was about to get in a trap and killed. So I think they did great work in going around that. But for the future, we need something more formalized, and probably work on what that looks like in the new year. Certainly make sure that it doesn't just die with this council. So we need something kind of structured and formalized for that group going forward. So I'll take that on in the new year. And yeah, I think the other committees that I'm sitting on, Curtis Stewart and so on, EPC, we've spoken about. Curtis Stewart, I think everyone's appraised of where that's going and what we want to do. So I don't have any more to add other than that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rabbit. Any other councillors? Anything? Looks like silence. Thank you very much.
Actually, there is.
Yeah, carry on.
Just from the Climate Action Committee perspective, we still have an opening. I know we put out an ad to seek another member. We had some informal interest, but no formal application. So I don't know if we could potentially repost that with a bit more emphasis on the need for a formal application. So if you are interested, there is a step you have to take. So we would like to fill that position. And the other piece is from the member Greg Weary, the Climate Action Committee, like to just ask us to look closer at the natural asset inventory. So he's looking for some support there. I don't have the on-table item with respect to that, but I'll bring it to the December. Maybe we can bring it to the December 14th council meeting.
It is here on table. Staff's got it, so know that staff in advance.
Yeah,
it's going to come. So if you move beforehand, that's even better.
Yeah. So if we could take that to the 14th, that'd be great. The next Climate Action Committee meeting is January 12th, 2022. So we'll plan on meeting.
Thank you very much to both the co-chairs.
So the one other thing I did want to mention, and it's not a committee, was refresh of the block watch. We need to take a bit of another look at that. I'll take it on. It's sort of fell off my priorities, and it really hasn't gone
as
smoothly the way as intended.
Yes.
The way we first set out and planned and thought it would do. So yeah, I need to put that back on my list of something that needs to be invigorated, if not reinvented.
Thank you very much. And I know,
sorry, just I don't necessarily believe the strategy is wrong. Just haven't managed to find the time to see it through and make sure it happens. I'm not suggesting we change the strategy that we came up with, but certainly needs a bit of input, a bit of effort from you.
Will you be coming back in the new year on this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good. Let's put it there. And I think that anything the greater we can do to help you, please don't hesitate to ask. I know you like to do a lot of heavy lifting by yourself, Councillor Rabbit, but I'm encouraging you to use the rest of us for some of it.
Spread the load.
you need. There we go. Thank you very much. Emergency services, I think we've covered most of that, which brings us to item 6, which is correspondence, which I think during our meetings, we received one piece of correspondence addressed to the councillors. I've forwarded it to the agenda for the December 14th meeting for formal reply. And so that new business, I don't think it quite applies to this session, but CAO, I mean, too. So I don't think so. So we'll go back to last opportunity for the public. And again, we've got some time. So public participation, will allocate 10 minutes to it. This would be the opportunity for the gallery to unmute, and Mayor Broughton will get you in a second. You would unmute. You don't have to undo your camera if you choose not to, but I'd ask that you hold yourself to 2 minutes, and we'll go with you, Mayor Broughton, and future ones, if you just raise your hand in the meantime, then I'll get you directly.
Sure. My question goes to Mr. Jaffer or Ms. Rook. And it's on page 94. It's just something in the graph regarding the diesel and gasoline. In 2019, on the diesel cost between 2018 and 2021 is all, let's say within liters of each other. Not literally, but within 1,000 liters of each other. In 2019, we had over a doubling of that.
Yes, that was due to a theft of diesel. I think the public works
thank you. Mike and I were sitting here going, theft. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, me too. I had forgotten, and I saw this chart, and I thought maybe the public works manager had made a typo.
Oh, profound.
And then I remembered we had a large theft of our diesel.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Now I want to bring up
Just a second, Mayor. See if we could claim back on insurance. No,
We didn't.
regrettably no.
No, that's very unfortunate. I mean, I do understand that this can happen, and it's very unfortunate, but it just stood out, and I thought if we hadn't analyzed it, it needed to be analyzed. Mayor McLaughlin, when you mentioned I think that I heard you say $9 million Britannia had received for their fire hall?
No, that's what they are doing their development, which everybody's somewhat aware of, and is a condition of getting all their approvals that they want. When I was meeting with the CEO of the property, he mentioned that one of the conditions of getting all of their development permits and the green lights, et cetera, was the construction of a $9 million cost fire department. And
right.
as this mentions it, I'm not sure where they're going to get the manning from it, but I guess as they grow their population, they'll get it.
So they're putting it as a development cost charge. It's not to the developers.
Yes.
Okay, I thank you. It was good to clarify that, because I thought holy.
Thank you very much, Mayor Broughton, and Merry Christmas. And anybody else, if you'd like to come forward, please unmute, and you've got 2 minutes.
You go on hand, haven't you?
That's my hand.
Is it your hand?
That's on Nye's face. There we go. All right, last chance. Nobody coming forward? None. Then we'll say goodnight to the gallery, because we are going to go into in camera. We thank everybody for their participation tonight and last night as well, and for your feedback at both sessions. Thank you very much. And let's see, CAO, if you could confirm, so we will pause this meeting and move to in camera on the same basis that we did last night. I don't believe I have to repeat that, do I?
No.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Council has closed the in-camera session and moved back into the open meeting. It is 6:32. And reporting out from the closed session is that on behalf of council, the mayor will be sending correspondence to a resident on matters that came before us in camera. And we expect that to be done next week. That would be the end of reporting out. I'll have a motion to close. Thank you. A seconder. Good. Thank you. And we're adjourned.
Evening all.
Night, folks.
Oh.
Good night, Fred. Good night, everyone.
Everybody.
Night.
Okay, we're good.